Actually, this is a program I'm really excited to be a part of. So I'm not with NASA, I'm a contractor supporting the program, and NIAC in its current incarnation is the NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts Program managed out of NASA headquarters. There was an earlier version of NIAC called the NASA Institute for Advanced Concepts, which was arranged to be explicitly outside of NASA, to specifically draw in ideas from outside of NASA. And in that institute, started in 1998, was led by Dr. Bob Casanova, managed by the University Space Research Associates, and I was fortunate enough to have been a part of the predecessor NIAC also from inception. So I helped them write up the proposal that in 97 that led to the creation of NIAC in 98. That one was meant to be a 10-year program. It was canceled at the 9th year because Mike Griffin, the administrator of NASA at the time, was in the process of trying to formulate a program that would get us back to the moon, and he was extremely focused on this program getting us back to the moon. He was unfortunately, and this will probably astound you, being as totally unusual, given guidance by his superiors that constrained cost, schedule, and technology, and he had to do meet all three of them in order to get back to the moon. And so naturally he was way over constrained, he was way stressed, and he started canceling any program at NASA, no matter how small, that looked like it was deflecting attention from his objective. NIAC at the time was about a $4 million program a year, and they canceled us anyway. Later on, Mike actually admitted that he really loved NIAC, but he couldn't do anything but cancel the program. So that NIAC was canceled. The outcry from the public was so great, truly outcry from the public. This was not a lobbying effort by USRA or anything. Okay, I wasn't a part of USRA. I was part of ANSWER, always was a part of ANSWER. I've been with ANSWER, which is a not-for-profit company, for over 30 years. But there was not a lobbying effort to reinstate NIAC. There really was a cry from the public that, hey, why did you kill that little tiny program? It was doing some really wonderful things. That led Congress to direct NASA to do an NRC study, National Research Council study, specifically on the value of NIAC to NASA. The cost of that study was probably half as much as an annual run of NIAC, if you know NRC studies. John, were you on that study? Okay, you weren't on that. Well,
on the old and the new NIAC.
Yeah, John's been with us. You'll see his name soon. So the NRC study came out and said, hey, NASA, this NIAC was a really cool thing. It was really fostering innovative thinking. It was really engaging the intellectual process of the nation. People liked it. You should think about doing it again with a few changes. Okay, and among the changes they suggested was, one, not make it an independent institute that sits totally outside NASA, but rather bring it into NASA. Allow NASA centers to bid, because at the time NASA was excluded, even JPL, was excluded from submitting proposals to NIAC because the whole idea was to bring ideas from outside NASA. But the NRC said, there's a lot of interesting ideas within the centers that are being stifled by the centers. Well, can you imagine that? But anyway, and that this would give them an outlet. After a few years of hiatus, NASA did reinstate NIAC in pretty much the revised form, and in the form that you're going to see here, which was still fairly close to the original, except for these changes. The biggest changes inside NASA, and NASA could now bid. That in the new NIAC, so they renamed it NIAC because they wanted to keep the branding that the public knew, so they had to come up with a different label, and so they came up with NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts instead of NASA Institute for Advanced Concepts, but they wanted the branding to be the same. they asked Bob Casanova and me to help them formulate the new program before it came into existence, so that so they'd have some advice on how to keep it true to its roots. And then I was extremely fortunate. They brought me on full-time as a consultant to the program, and I repeated the title that I had given myself before, Senior Science Advisor, because I only wanted to worry about the fun technical stuff, not all the administrative stuff about budgets and defending the program and that kind of stuff. So that's a short background. And so the NIAC was reinstituted in the first. So the original NIAC ended in about 2007. In about 2011, NIAC issued its first call for new proposals. That year, Bobby Braun was the chief technologist at NASA in what became the Space Technology Mission Directorate. He was one of the ones on the NRC study saying that this was a good idea. He really wanted us to get off to a really quick start, so he turned to Jay Falker, who was the original NIAC program executive, and says, hey, here's a bunch of money, go out and issue this RFP. How fast can you issue the RFP? So that really put us on the spot. We got, I believe it was 700 proposals that year that we had to evaluate in like a month. So it was pretty exciting. But that was all the backlog and all the hype and everything else, all boiled up in once for that big a number. We've settled down to on the order of 200 proposals a year, but I'll get into some of that in a little bit. Okay, so what in the broadest sense is NIAC? It's a program to support early studies of innovative yet credible visionary concepts that could one day change the possible. And we take every word of that seriously in managing this program. Visionary, innovative, credible, and changing the possible, every bit of that we take very seriously in NIAC. It's still inside what's called the Space Technology Mission Directorate at NASA, which is a directorate. There's the Science Mission Directorate, the Human the HEO, Human Exploration Office, and there's the Science, and there's the Space Technology Mission Directorate, and there's the Aeronautics Mission Directorate. Those are the four big research branches of NASA. STMD is the smallest, but it's cross-cutting across all of them. And if you're reading the news, there's a reorganization underway at NASA. So everything I say about Space Technology Mission Directorate now is probably not going to necessarily be the right description, even as much as a month from now. So there's going to be some reorganization. But everyone has assured us that no matter how it reorganizes, NIAC is going to survive pretty much intact. So the Space Technology Mission pipeline goes from early stage. This is one of the nice things about having NIAC inside NASA headquarters now. Under Bob Casanova, it was really, really hard when we found a good idea to get that idea infused into NASA. As an example, we had someone who had a really innovative spacesuit concept. She worked really hard on this idea. Anytime we go to NASA headquarters, to the spacesuit office, they really didn't want to listen to her. She became the number 2 person in NASA a few years ago, right under the administrator. David Newman was the associate administrator. So, no matter how good your idea was, no matter how brilliant you were, it was really hard to infuse your idea into NASA. That's not a totally blanket statement. We had some concepts under Casanova that dramatically changed the way NASA's doing business. And one of them was by Webb Cash, University of Colorado down the street here, who came up with what is now known as the star shade, I guess, which is an incredibly creative idea for how you can blank the light from a star enough to see the reflected light of a planet near the star and directly image that planet. Okay. Not only did he have this brilliant idea that is today mainstream for how we're going to eventually image these planets, he changed the name of the Astrophysics Decadal Survey when they redid the Decadal Survey. And so his New Worlds Imager became embedded in the new Decadal Survey for astrophysics. So when we ask for people to come up with cool ideas, we don't say, go look at what NASA is doing today. We say, go look at what NASA should be doing and tell us how we can get there. We want to break the decadals, basically, where Science Mission Directorate cannot give you $1 in research money if you can't point to the decadal that says this is important. So we want to break those decadals in our group. But in this early stage process, because we're now embedded in NASA, it's much easier for us to share what we're doing with the rest of the Technology Mission Directorate. They're very familiar with what they're doing. The people that we most need to talk to are right down the hall, and they get exposure to ideas from infancy. Even when we're making the selection process, we ask the mission directorates, what do you think of any of these? Thumbs up, thumbs down. That doesn't affect our selection, but it informs the source selection official about what kind of background interest there might be. That can be good or bad for the project. In some cases, we've had proposals that the Science Mission Directorate says, that definitely scratches an itch we have. And then when we tell the source selection official, we got a lot of enthusiasm from the Science Mission Directorate. That's a plus. They're primarily listening to the rating that we got in a technical review. But it was a plus. Okay, Science Mission Directorate says that's an itch that they need to scratch, and they don't have the funds to do it, or they don't have, it's beyond their current range. So that'll help them fund it. On other times, we had a project, we went in, and the Human Research Program says that is the stupidest thing we've ever heard. We would never ever do that. Don't even think about doing that. The source selection official said, well, if they're not going to do it, we better do it. And we funded it. Okay? And we've had that kind of path more than once. So it really is a very fun program to be a part of. And this ability to infuse is much better now, and we're getting a much better success rate in getting things moving down this pipeline. We're still too young for me to answer the common question that I get, which is, what are your successes? How much impact have you made? Okay, we're talking about things that are 10, 20, 30 years from now. So even though we've had some near-term successes that have had a significant impact, we can't put some good statistics up for you yet. We're not only unique, though, in the types of studies that we perform, okay, and the focus that we perform. I think we're unique, and this is going back to Bob Casanova's roots and his idea for NIAC. We don't call the principal investigators of the studies PIs. We call them fellows. And we involved them in a fellowship of NIAC, And I think Anthony can vouch for that from his experience. Hopefully Heidi and Jim will be able to vouch for that in their examples and their following. So we bring everybody together once a year in an exchange. Everybody gets exposed to everybody else's work. There's a lot of discussion back and forth. And I think once a fellow, always a fellow also holds true. We have some people who won only a phase 1, didn't get a phase 2, still are excited about the project because that was their only chance to ever look at that phase 1 in a formal way, and still stay engaged. So we're unique, I think, in that fellowship aspect. And of course, the media love us, which is a good thing in most cases. Occasionally we'll get our zinger, but overall we get a lot of good publicity. Bob Casanova was always happy with the chart like this that reflected the media outlets of his studies, and he was really happy because buried in the corner there would be Playboy. Everybody just gets the magazine to read the articles, and we were an article in Playboy once, but this one doesn't have the Playboy. But we do have some Washington. One of our concerns, one of the headquarter concerns, not necessarily our concerns, is, yeah, but what's the Washington Post going to say? Okay? And happily, we've had two front page articles about NIAC. One was under Bob and one was later. Okay? And in the later one, quoted here, June 12th, 2014, you thought, it's small print, so I'll try to read it. If you thought Elon Musk was the only person coming up with innovative ideas for the exploration of outer space, you'd be wrong. It says, ultimately, that's the beauty of the NASA Innovative Advanced Concepts program. It lets people dream big, commits only a relatively small amount of seed money up front, and is capable of generating 10 to 100 times return. That's just the way it works in Silicon Valley. That's the Washington Post talking about us. And so we thought that was pretty cool that we got a positive. We didn't get the opposite perspective. Who's the congressman that they named the award after for doing the most stupid things? Like, there's a famous award that gets, I won't go there. I won't go there. But anyway, we're not on that extreme. We're on the positive side, and that's really nice. So here's the program. Here's the people that run the program. It's just the, pardon? The Proxmire Awards, yes. We're not on the Proxmire side of things. We're on the plus side of things. I'm sure that we get some, anyway. Jason Derleth is a program executive, NASA person. Mike LaPointe is just, many of you probably will know Michael LaPointe because he's space transportation, advanced transportation for a very long time. Was just added as our program manager. We're delighted to have Michael LaPointe on as a formal member of the team now. He's still at Marshall, but he's full-time NIAC now. I'm with ANSWER, Senior Science Advisor. Kathy Reilly is the real brains behind all this wonderful representing all the media attention that we get, and also organizing outreach activities where we invite our fellows in to give talks at major museums called Science Fiction to Science Fact, and gets good attendance. We even have now a World Book series of 8 books that are geared toward middle school. And each of the 8 books is a focus on a single NIAC fellow and their idea. So each little thin book. That turned out to be such a bestseller for World Book that they're going to start it again. And we're going to get 8 more fellows represented in the next round. Okay? So it's great public outreach, all of which is almost directly the result of Kathy Reilly's participation in the program. And she works with the fellows on a regular basis to make sure they understand, what's expected. And of course we have our very important budget analyst. She's the NASA person, Barbara Mader. She's a civil servant. And then we have some other contractors also supporting the program. But in addition to the core that does the day-to-day work, again, following up on Casanova's concept of the program, we have an external council that helps guide us, and they meet with us twice a year just to sort of say how they think the program is going. Are we still on track? The importance of this, and you will recognize right away one of the names, Dr. John Kramer. You'll probably also, many of you, recognize the name Frank Drake, and also Lou Friedman. So those are people that many of you should know personally from this community. We just added Greg Zacharias to represent the Air Force, or the DoD. We had Yaramovich, Michael Yaramovich representing the DoD, but he finally stepped down after several years. So we've got a really wide representation. The importance is that now our program executive is getting input independent of NASA. Okay, that's the important thing. So if Jason Derleth or Jay Falker before him, if all he could do is respond to what his NASA upper echelon said he had to do, then his hands would be tied a lot tighter than they are. Now he can go to with the external council behind us of luminaries, he can go to these people and say, well, we've got this external council of people like Lou Friedman and John Kramer and Frank Drake, and they're telling us this, okay? And NASA hierarchy listens, and that's good, okay? So we have so we have some inertia in the program to keep us from getting swung left and right, depending on the whim of NASA today, which, as everybody knows, is extremely volatile. We are not constrained by today's program at NASA. We are here to inform NASA's program 10 to 20 years from now and enable a NASA program 10 to 20 years from now. And it's that line that's helping us deal with the day-to-day. In other words, if NASA came to us and said, oh, we're going to go to the moon now. What are you going to do to help me get to the moon? We say, well, you're planning on getting to the moon in 5 to 7 years, right? But our event horizon starts at 10. So there's nothing we can do now to get you to the moon in 5 to 7 years. And I scratch it, yeah, that's probably right. Okay, so it helps. So what about this greater NIAC community? Well, this is a slide Kathy put together, which pretty much describes most of you in this room here. And we're very proud of that. How do we work? Phase 1s and phase 2s. Phase 1 research, up to $125K for 9 months, which leads in some cases to a phase 2 up to $500K for 2 years. So Heidi was a phase 1 fellow, and they did their work, and for their own reasons they decided to transition the fellow over to Jim. So Jim's now the fellow for phase 2. Similarly, Anthony was a phase 1 fellow for his idea. And when he got to phase 2, transitioned the fellow to Bob Skelton, so we allow that kind of exchange. If you don't know Anthony's background, he's basically architect. So we don't ask people to come out of a JPL center in order to be a credible NIAC fellow. Okay, so this is this basic thing. How do you get your phase 1? We do it now. Since that first year with, I think I misspoke. I think it was 900 proposals came in that year. But 700 already sounds absurd, so I stopped there. And they all came in at once, and it was an omnibus proposal that we had to make our selections from. Well, now we do it in a 2-step process. So you have a step A, which is a mere 3 pages, and a 4th page, a quad chart that answers certain questions we ask of you. And then on top of that, you have to fill in all the rest of the Inspire boilerplate. But we never read that anyway, so it's okay. It's basically the 3-page white paper describing your concept. What is the core of your idea? Why is it innovative? So like I said, we're getting on the order of 200 of those a year the last few years. We look at those and invite a subset of those to submit a step B proposal, which is much more onerous. It's 8 pages. So in addition to the concept, now you have to add your teaming agreements, your teaming arrangements, the study approach that you're going to execute. What are you actually going to deliver in your 9 months? Still only 8 pages with the quad chart. The step B proposals, the step A is reviewed by the program office under very tight guidelines. Okay, the step B is reviewed by your technical peers. Step B proposals are reviewed by your technical peers. First in a technical panel specifically of your peers. 3 technical panels usually is how much it works down to. And then an integration panel of some other senior people, mostly outside NASA people, that try to combine the results of the 3 technical panels into one set of recommendations that'll go to the source selection official. And then of course you get your $125K for a 9-month study, you get the title NIAC Fellow, and you get the coveted NIAC mug, which you can only get by winning a NIAC award. And so far we haven't found any of those on eBay, so we think people must like them. Okay. So we've been doing this round since 2011. We've had a total of 131 phase 1s awarded. I looked up these numbers after Heidi asked me to give the talk to make sure they were current for up to now. 131 phase 1s, 52 phase 2s, so it's 183 combined studies. What this chart really shows though is the dollars awarded. Anybody can bid. Okay, you can be an architect and you can bid. You can be someone who builds prefab houses and you can bid. Okay, you can be someone who looks at optics in your back, literally in your garage and builds little, desktop things and bid. Okay, and in each of those cases we had wins out of each of those. Okay, so you can be industry, you can be academia, but you can also be NASA, which means JPL and everything, and the JPL, proposal machinery that's very, 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 very good. So the concern when we first came out and said even NASA can bid is that NASA would swamp the awards, that this was just a secret way for NASA to funnel additional money to NASA centers. We do not put a quota on the awards. We look only at the ideas until we get to the very, very, very last step, which influences a very small number. I'll go into that later. What I'm proud to say is that within statistics, the awards have gone a third to industry, a third to academia, and a third to NASA. And particularly when you look at the combined awards, the one-third, one-third, one-third is almost insignificant. Now that money is book kept by the PIs, doesn't count how the PIs distribute the money later, but the point is, we're not getting, a NASA-centric organization. It's not a secret way to funnel NASA to do NASA stuff. It is widely distributed. Kathy has a chart that shows how far it is over the country, which we have to put together for our senators, of course, but it's fairly well distributed.
Is JPL counter?
JPL counts under NASA. And JPL does get a fairly good chunk of the NASA awards. And when I say that they're at the onesies or twosies, we've had some, switches. At the final source selection level, if we see JPL is overrepresented, they have taken like one JPL award out and put the next highest, say, academic institution in place. But it's out of 15 awards, I don't think I ever said that. Typically there's about 15 phase 1s a year and about 7 phase 2s a year. That's, remember, 200 proposals, 15 awards. But maybe there's 200 step A's, probably on the order of 75 step B invites, 15. So it's not as bad as that. It's not as bad as 200 to 15. It's more, you'd really compare the 75 to 15. Still very competitive. So, at the 15 level, you take maybe the source selection for portfolio balance might do a onesie or a twosie, and that's about the worst we've seen. And as far as what kind of things we fund, I think this chart here was actually put together for a AIAA paper. So it's maybe one level behind our last set of awards. But we fund almost anything NASA does, and we do have a good distribution. And again, we don't have a, what was the word I used a little while ago? We don't constrain it. We don't say there must be so many in this and so many in that. And there's no. But this is the way it works. And now transportation does get not when you get to phase 2. But we cover almost everything that NASA does. We even can do aeronautics concepts, even though we're in the Space Technology Mission Directorate, because there's nobody else at NASA that could look that far out in aeronautics concepts. And we have funded aeronautics concepts, really interesting ones. Yeah. Okay. Great, you're all excited, you want to win, what do you have to do? Think up an innovative concept that'll change the way NASA does business. You're all here because you think along those lines. Watch for the release of the NIAC call. Unfortunately, it did in fact go out in August, and it's due next week. So hey, you got a whole weekend. It got delayed a day because of Hurricane Florence, so now you got till Wednesday instead of Tuesday. But seriously, what you have to do most of all is pay attention to these proposal preparation instructions. You have to put your concept in an architecture, mission, or system context. That's the hardest thing for the bidders to really do. We do not pay you to develop your special sauce, your secret sauce. We pay you to tell NASA why someday they should want to help you develop your secret sauce. We're one step away from being a technology program. So Heidi, in her program, it was very important that she not just say, hey, we're going to explore Jim's Mach effect thruster. Okay? Rather, she had to embed in her program as a core element of the program, if the Mach effect thruster does what we think it might do, what would it enable? Which is this interstellar transport. Okay, what kind of thing would that be like? What would that be like? So you have to take a big leap of faith and say, here's my vision, what is it going to accomplish? But it has to be grounded on a vision that has some credibility in the peer review process. Okay, and they passed that bullet. Okay, but what's really hard is this getting your thing in a mission context. The other thing that you have to do in the proposal preparation instructions, we give 10 specific things that we do not fund. Okay? If your proposal looks like any of those 10 things, you do not get invited to step B. You are automatically out of scope. Again, I'll show you how that rates. Like, no aerospace focus. It has to have something to do with NASA's mission. We get... I think in 2017, nobody failed on point number 10. Everybody finally understands it's got to have something to do with NASA. We don't fund tools and processes. So if you have a neat tool that helps the design process of a mission, or helps the selection of a broad range of missions, okay, it's a new neat tool, that's great. It's just not us. Not programmatically credible. This is a judgment call. But if you're asking us to do something that's either so far, Dyson spheres. If you want to study Dyson spheres, we're probably not going to pay you to do it, okay? Because the cost, the programmatic cost of constructing a Dyson sphere is not going to happen probably within 40 years. That doesn't mean your outlook can't be long. Anthony's program, looking at a 5,000 person space, habitat in space, is a big deal. But what helped for them in the programmatically credible bullet was they said, look, we're not going to just go up and build in situ a 5,000 person habitat. We're going to show you how you can launch a seed and grow from the seed to the 5,000 to 8,000 person habitat. And not only are we going to show you how to do that, but we have a cool little idea on what makes it work, which was the basic tensegrity idea that was going to allow this thing to stretch and expand the way it does. Okay? So programmatically, he has a path forward, right? So, but not programmatically credible if it's, beyond the scope. Okay, we're not going to ask you to step B. Now we'll tell you in the call if you think that we think that you're violating the programmatic aspect or any of the other ones, you can tell us in your step A explicitly why you're not, and we'll listen to what your argument is. Okay, so and you might win. Okay. And get invited at least to step B. Previously studied is a major bone of contention. People mentioned today. People mentioned mass drivers and electric gun. The whole mass drivers, and if there's been decades of study on mass drivers for getting material from the lunar surface to lunar orbit, and a new study is not going to contribute to the literature, it's out of scope. If you have some new wrinkle, that's going to be different from the literature, and suddenly an electromagnetic railgun or launcher might be more credible than it has been perceived to be in the past, it's at least going to go to review. But if it looks like it's just another railgun study, that we've had so many railgun studies, that's been in so many conferences, you know, another study is not going to advance the state of the art. We want to change the possible, okay? We don't fund experiment or research. This is a really critical thing for Heidi and Jim, okay? They could not have bid to us that says, we want to build another one of these little devices and test it a little bit better than it's been tested before. Okay, we want to build another one of these little devices and put it in a test stand that's a newer and better test stand than has ever been used before. Because we don't fund experiments and research. If you have a really cool way to create a silicon substrate for electronics that might in fact be groundbreaking for, you know, radiation hard electronics for NASA, that's wonderful, but it's not what we're going to be able to fund. What you have to do is you have to say, my silicon wafer is so cool and so different that it's going to enable this class of mission, and pick an example and put your silicon wafer into that example and show us why that silicon wafer is going to create something that's totally different from what NASA's done before.
And that's true for both phase 1 and phase 2?
Phase 1 and phase 2. So in phase 2, the same rule gets applied. So Heidi still has to tell us what her ultimate spaceship might look like based on the direction of her research. Heidi and Jim still have to tell us. Jim's the PI and a fellow now, so it's on his shoulders. You still have to have this vision, and you still have to include that in your report. And when we have your midterm review, you still have to have an hour on that concept. Yes, Jim?
You should understand that it was bureaucratic rules and stuff like that that led to the transfer of the yardship.
But they've responded to this constraint. So they couldn't take their whole 500K and put it just in their MET thruster. They still have.
I just want everyone to know that it was not some fault of Heidi's or anything like that.
It was the advantage, it was the insight, it was the cleverness of Heidi that she was there. For example, we have a... So we have another, yeah. We have another, yeah. We have another study that we're funding now at the phase 2 level, which at broad brush is kind of similar. It's one that uses an innovative fusion concept. So we have actually funded 4 or 5 or 6 fusion concepts. Stephanie Thomas probably is even better than Heidi, who scored high. Stephanie Thomas really read our instructions, and if you ever want to see what a NIAC study should look like, find Stephanie Thomas's phase 1 final report and look carefully at what she did. Because she put this fusion concept in the context of a mission to Pluto and showed how you could get to Pluto in 5 years. Once you're at Pluto, you can actually stop at Pluto and not go sailing on into the cosmos. And not only can you stop and orbit Pluto, you have so much energy left over, you can beamed power, to a lander that's going to do experiments on the surface. Okay, so she doesn't have the fusion device working yet. Okay, she's working with the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab, which is a very credible institution for fusion, behind her, and they think with $50 million they might be able to get this thing working. We just had their midterm review this summer. She took her secret sauce and put it in a mission context better than anybody I've ever seen. So if you want a lesson in how you do the mission concept, Stephanie's a good example. But we don't fund experiments and research. Not technically credible? All right. Heidi and Jim made it, in spite of some concern about bullet number 5. Okay? So we take this to the peer reviewers and we say, just, how big a leap is this? Okay? Unclear concept is, this is especially the step A, you try to bid something and you say, well, there's this really major problem. We're going to study that problem and we're going to tell you what the answer is. But you don't put any bones behind it. You don't tell us what your secret sauce is. You just say, this is a really hard problem. We think we know how to solve it. Trust us, give us some money, and we'll give you an answer. Unclear concept. That was about 10% of the, now we're starting to reach the ones that we get a lot of rejection numbers on. Unclear mission application, you really do have to put your concept in a mission application. Okay, and I'll get back to that in a minute. Narrowly focused technology. Way too many, in a frustrating way, of our proposals are still proposing very narrow widgets and what they want to do with a very narrow widget. We are not NIAT, we're NIAC. We're not technology, we're concepts. So if you've got a really cool subsystem and you want us to just pay you to develop your subsystem, or you've got to, then you're not NIAC. You've got to put your idea, you've got to be thinking broader. You have to be showing us why your idea is cool. And the number one reason, incremental. Too many of our proposals come in and they just want another way to advance their state of the art. And if the judgment is, or even if they sometimes say it out loud, right there in black and white, that you just want to advance your technology, it's not going to be NIAC. We really want the next generation of stuff. Now, so what happens is the program team looks at all the step A's. If any of, and we look at them against these criteria, if anybody on the program review wants it to go to review, it goes to review. It's not, so if two of us say, oh, that's incremental, and the other person says, no, I don't think it is, then we're going to leave it to the technical panels to decide. Okay, so it's not a serial, it's a parallel decision here. So that's the way we do the step A's. A little bit more about that mission context. I've probably beaten on it a lot. It's a hard thing for the technologists to wrap their head around, but you have to compare your concept to other competing concepts to show that it's better. You have to compare to state of the art, already under development, or previously considered. You can't just say, well, nobody's ever built a mass driver, therefore I'm going to propose a mass driver. Okay. Okay. It must also show in a quantifiable way that it would substantially improve mission costs. It can't just be a better alternative. It can't just be an almost equivalent alternative. If you bid something that's really neat and really clever, but there's easier ways or simpler ways or lower risk ways to do it, there's no reason to do that. Other ways like reduced mass or substantially faster access or longer lifetime, higher payload mass. You've got to show us what why. Why do we care? Like I said, the 2018 solicitation you still have until next Wednesday now. Otherwise, next year. The phase 2's solicitation for all the phase 1's underway. We're going to start that. They'll be due in February. A very cool thing though is if you're considering bidding and we haven't yet released the call, you can call me and say, does this make sense? Is this within scope? Does this pass your 10, thou shalt nots? And I can actually counsel you on how to make sure that your idea fits in NIAC's budget. I can't tell you whether you're going to win or not because that's going to be decided later. Okay. And we're going to have a symposium just in a couple of weeks in Boston. You're all invited to come back and attend that one. Heidi and Jim will be presenting theirs. Anthony, you're still up this year or not?
No.
No, you're out. You're a graduate. You're a graduate of the program. Bob's not going to be there, okay? Because you're at the end of your phase 2. But even if you can't go, we broadcast this live stream. So the whole time is live stream. We actually have a mechanism for asking questions through the live stream, and some of those questions get up, if we pick it up in time from the guy in the back monitoring the questions, we can ask your questions, that kind of things. Yes, Mike?
Just as a funding profile and timeline, it was, I think, $125K and 9-month duration. Are there restrictions on how that funding gets allocated to the NIAC fellow versus a team? And the reason I asked is I was thinking that, could you have something where that phase one, instead of supporting one person toiling in their office, supports 5 people for a month-long sprint, all full-time, and generates a mission, study, and profile, and fleshes out the concept? How does that get looked at?
It's $125K, and you tell us how you're going to spend it.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
legitimate.
Yeah. And it's actually the other extreme. It hurts JPL more than anybody else. JPL is going to bid a study, and invariably they'll have 25 people listed as contributing to this phase 1 study, and our phase 1 technical review panel knows the cost of JPL time, and we say, okay, that means they're going to be spending about 3 minutes this week and 5 minutes the next on this. Come on, guys, what are you really going to do? And so, yeah, it is a total cost. And by the way, that means total cost. If cost equivalent, when NASA bids, they don't get an advantage by using NASA full-time equivalent hours. They have to do a level playing field. They have to, we reflect their cost so that it's an equivalent of 125K, so NASA doesn't get an advantage that way. Now,
I was wondering, the PI and most of the members have to be US citizens, right?
yeah, we only fund U.S. Sorry, there's a lot of, there's no exchange of funds to foreign nationals.
What if I were to hire a student or postdoc?
You'll have to worry with the NASA hierarchy about what exactly works. Okay, a lot of NASA if they're a graduate student or a postdoc at a U.S. accredited university, that's not a problem.
That's fine,
Yeah, that's not a problem. It's just we can't, because the money is going to the university.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and it's going to the U.S. university. We have several studies where there really are foreign entities heavily involved at a no-cost basis. We have one that's studying this deployment of wires to push against the solar wind drives this device. There's a Finnish group that sort of came up with the idea originally, and they brought them on as consultants at no cost to them, no exchange of funds. Similarly, we have some Japanese investigators on another program. So, sometimes it's the cachet of being recognized as a NIAC fellow that brings people on even though they're not going to get the money for it.
One other thing, would I be allowed to say, pay for a foreign person to come and visit me and work at my institution for a while?
The person you asked there is Barb Mader, and our program analyst, and I'm not a senior science advisor. so I don't know. I'm not going to answer your intellectual property questions or anything like that. That's for the rest of the program. Yes.
I'm going to be a little bit of a naysayer.
Oh, that's good.
It's not
I understand.
that I don't like the NIAC program. I think NIAC
Right.
program is good, but what my problem is with your reviewers. I've got through phase A twice, and then we rejected in phase B because the reviewer misunderstood
Exactly.
the proposal.
I understand.
So I decided I'll never submit another one.
Okay,
again.
so
But doesn't mean I wouldn't be
So-
on somebody else's.
So I've got a couple of anecdotes for that. Number one, you're looking at the person who puts together the NIAC technical review panel. That's my job. Senior science advisor means I'm the technical guy. So I put together the panels. I invite people in for the panels. I do my best to get a balanced panel. We're open to everything that comes into NASA. So we have 3 panels. The transportation panel typically has transportation and power and maybe a couple of other odd things thrown in. Okay? And transportation itself is very broad. I do my best to have people who actually because at the time I put the panels together, I know what the proposals are. Nonetheless, one can never have a fully comprehensive set. Also, this is personal dynamics. If there's a loudmouth on the panel, personal dynamics. That person, if he or she misunderstands a proposal and he speaks up and says this is rubbish because, and there's a couple of other people who don't understand it, they might listen to that guy. And we do our best to facilitate those discussions. Now wait a minute, I'm going to keep going. So, I understand your problem. Now, The only reclama is when you get the reviews, so we do send a full technical review out to everybody. Afterwards, this is not going to help you in that year's selection process. You call me up and you say, Ron, these guys were stupid. Why did they do that? Okay, that doesn't make any sense at all. Sometimes that helps me the following year, but it also helps you the following year because you know what they're going to attack, and you have the opportunity in a resubmission to say, we were dinged on this, explicitly in the proposal, we were dinged on this, and this is why it's not so. Okay? There was a rare case where the thought was, this wasn't one of your proposals, so I'm not going out of school. There was a rare case where three different groups all thought that they were totally being railroaded, okay, in this review. No, it was two groups. Two groups thought they were being railroaded by the panel, and they sent us detailed letters refuting the review, okay? In that case, we took because we were concerned that there may have been a person on the panel who was intentionally destroying a concept. We took the comments, we took the reviews, we took the proposal, we sent them to 3 completely new reviewers to comment on whether the concerns were right, okay? The 3 reviewers had a chance to look at what was actually submitted as opposed to what someone might have known outside, and said, based on what was printed in the proposal, the reviewers got it right. Okay, and what the concern was stuff that was outside that the reviewers didn't have access to, and they were able to trace that. Okay? So it happens. I totally understand that it happens. It's an imperfect process. I think it does fairly well. I'm the person that you first go to after you get your reviews. If you don't like my response, you can either not like my response, or you can take what I say to adjust your next year's bid, or you can continue to just say, it's never going to work because they're never going to believe me. Okay? Go ahead.
Well, at the time, I didn't know you.
Understand, and I try to get around, and yeah.
He just basically told me that I'd have to submit it in the next year.
But I hope he said, look at what they said, submit it next. Oh, you would have had to submit it again. Even in that case where we went to outside reviewers, there was not going to be any way that we could back up and
doing it twice and basically having.
I understand, but I understand. I understand. Now, I had another person recently who said exactly the same thing to me at a conference. He says, this is never going to work. He heard me give my talk, and he says, while you were giving your talk, I had one more idea, and I'm going to give it one more shot. And he won this last year. Okay, so.
So, what is the role of the external counsel and the chair of the external counsel?
The external counsel is truly there just as a soft advisor. It's not a FACA committee. It's not, anything hard. It's just there to sort of nudge us. Okay, so they see what we've done. They don't participate in reviews. Okay, they participate in a symposium in the way of asking questions and generating discussion. So they're at the symposia. So they're there for that. They listen to what we've done. They tell us, I think you're missing this whole discipline, and then they advise us on how we might reach out to that discipline to get, more proposals back from that community. So they give us advice, and John can tell you more about what he thinks the role of the NEC is.
Yeah, well, in a couple of cases, there have been approved proposals that were clear to me that the physics was wrong and never should have been approved, and I was able to get Ron feedback about that, and so that the review process could be approved. But we never see in advance any of the proposals. We simply go to the meetings like this one coming up in Boston and hear the presentations. There's also a preliminary meeting in June where it's sort of a poster session, and we hear about those, but it's always after the fact that things have been granted, so you can't twist my arm to get your proposal.
And by the way, if you,
What's the role of the chair within the?
facilitator, just
He has to
facilitator.
write out most of the paperwork that the
Yeah.
council generates.
Yeah, he has the bureaucracy and facilitate.
It's not a particularly good job. I'm glad I'm not the chair.
That's right. And if you haven't noticed yet, this artwork here came from Anthony's work. It's inside his it's inside his big vessel.
By the way, if you need a reviewer for your panel, I'll
Sure.
volunteer.
Oh, and I'm loved to.
I don't think I'll ever submit it.
I understand. Yeah. So any of you that want to review, just send me that want to be considered for the panel. Probably not the Dresden people. It'll be U.S. people that come in on the panel. I'm always open to new reviewers. I always have a need for new reviewers. So that's good. Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity.